Друзья, всем привет.
Hello everyone, my name is Oleg Shakirov. I have a channel Cyber War. Usually I work and deal with more international problems, but today we will speak about a very local problem about administrative fines and leaks, administrative cases on leaks. So why do I care about this? We have quite a lot of data leaks, everybody knows about this, but if you read the news, you might think that this is some kind of fiction, it's not real. On the news, you can hear that the leaks were not true, everything was under control. If something was leaked, it was old, not used data. Question closed. So how do we know what actually happened? We have a transparent system, transparent legal system, and the organizations have to be responsible according to those leaks, and those cases are open. Based on my research nature, I decided to read those cases. I read about 19 of them, and I wanted to share the statistics. The organizations have to be responsible for the law 13.1 on administrative cases, administrative codex. It's an article on incorrect processing of personal data. And usually companies that had problems with personal data, some leaks, maybe companies that would send promotion or ads via SMS messages, or maybe call potential clients without explicit agreement from the other side. And even in 2022, in Moscow, we had more cases which were not malicious in intent, but just poor business practice. But in 2023, the number of cases which were provoked by hacker attacks increased significantly. This is red on the screen. According to the current law and the current article, those companies did not protect personal data well enough, and that's why they are held responsible. We have 92 cases in Moscow in the last 2 years, which are connected with hacker attacks. Most of them are published, you can read it yourself. And this is what we'll be talking about today. So, first of all, what does it mean to have a hacker leaks? Well, we will use the term hacker leaks, even though it's not really clear one. It's not really accurate one. First of all, we have the hacking itself. It could be different hacking, but the personal data operator can understand what happened at this point. Obviously, this is the perfect solution, the perfect world, but as we can see according to the legal practice, this is not what happens. Oftentimes, operators learn together with Roskomnadzor when this information becomes public. And it becomes public when hackers publish it on their resources, on Twitter, forums, Telegram, and because of secondary resources like mass media or popular channels which talk about data leaks, and then this information gets to Roskomnadzor and operator, they exchange data, then Roskomnadzor creates a protocol and files a complaint. Usually the process is pretty fast, and in most cases the end is fine, and the organizations which Usually the end is just a fine for the organization. So how does Roskomnadzor know about this? First of all, it's monitoring. It means that Roskomnadzor takes information from the internet, from hacker channels, from mass media, from forums, databases leaks, and so on. Next is checks. Maybe document checks, maybe on-site checks. It happened more in 2022. Basically, on each incident, Roskomnadzor had to physically go to the premises of an organization and perform a check. And they analyzed information which they had on the internet and what they had on site. Obviously, it takes a lot of effort and time. And at the end of 2022, Roskomnadzor had an order that operators had to file this complaint themselves that there were data leaks. And now that's why they monitor data from the internet. And the second point is notification from personal data operators. So if you notify if you notify Roskomnadzor about data leaks, this notification will be used against you in court. Unfortunately, this is how it is. There is a first-time notification when you are telling about the fact that data was leaked, and the second notification, it should be sent within 3 days, and it should have the results of an investigation. I will not go into details, but in some investigations you can see that information security companies were involved, or maybe they have a dedicated department and they actually knew about what happened and why this happened. But most of the times it looked like there was a leak because there was a leak. Thanks to those cases, we can actually look at different hacker groups. This is a list of potential hacker groups where we can single out these cases where we can actually identify a hacker group or a hacker who is at fault here. And you can multiply this by 60,000, which is the usual fine, and you can just calculate it. Obviously, the damages is not just calculated in fines. So the question is how much data, how many instances of data were leaked? Well, we do not really know. In 41 cases of 92, they specified the number of elements, how much data was leaked. And here on the slide you can see potential changes. They are still discussed, and they range based on the number of lines, up to 10,000, between 10,000 and 100, and more than 1 million. If we take a look at the extremes and ranges, the smallest one was from one of the Moscow schools, just a few hundred of them, and the biggest, one of the telecom companies, for millions of lines. And both of them were fined for the same amount, 60,000 rubles. Roskomnadzor doesn't care about the number of lines. When it's the court time, many organizations just comply and the case closes. Somebody tries to fight it. Well, maybe fighting is not the correct word, but it's on the court here, that's why we'll use this word. So what kind of attempts? What do they say that? Well, basically, in many cases, they say that it was not proved that they had a cyber attack, and that's why they don't have to pay the fine. Sometimes it works, most of the times it doesn't. Next, they did not have any complaints from users. Sometimes the court received it, but the court doesn't really care about this. Next point, the leak does not contain personal data, and everybody who worked with this personal data can understand that it will be wider or smaller, could be different interpretation. Maybe they could say it wasn't all data, test data, it's not personal data anymore, We do not see any examples where this actually worked. Next point is that our partner is at fault. It was not our fault, but our partner. In order to prove that, you need real evidence, but we do not see this kind of situation. Even if you have this data and the data was leaked by someone else, usually the solution is not in favor of this company. Next point is they did not have malicious intent, but the court doesn't care. Next point is the due date is long gone. We do understand why they try to say this, but according to the current legislation, it does not care. If Roskomnadzor decides and sees that your data is leaked 10 years ago, it doesn't really matter. They can have a protocol. So you can try and fight this, but this is what courts do. Next point, Roskomnadzor had violations, procedural violations during the checks. Sometimes it works during exception, but some organizations try to fight for justice. The leak was insignificant and had no damages. In some cases, the court agrees, but if it was personal data, even if it was 273 lines of data, it was significant enough. The next point is it was the first leak. Sometimes it works. And finally, we were hacked and we are not at fault. Who thinks that this kind of justification works? Well, some people think that it works. Well, you should remember this kind of answer. And 5 more points. I really like the one the organization said, we uploaded it to GitHub, but GitHub, well, basically GitHub leaked the data. We uploaded it, but GitHub leaked it. So how do you prove that you suffered from it? If we move to the legal area, you should go to police. In only 6 cases of 92, minus those which are not public, there is a mention that an organization went to police, and in 2 cases they were able to start a criminal case, but at least they tried to do so. Do you think it's important to go to police and to start a criminal case? Please raise your hand if you believe it's important. Well, we have more people who think it's important. And now we are reaching the culmination point. The solutions, the court decisions. Here on the slide you can see that in majority of cases, the court decision is a fine. There are some exceptions, we will talk about this later, but in the majority of cases they have administrative fines. Infowatch in 2021 had a report on 12.11, and the number of cases which ended with some kind of punishment was a little bit more than 50%. So according to hacker leaks, it's almost always just a fine. In most cases, it's 60,000 rubles. It's the minimum level of fine. Sometimes it can be lower if you are a small or medium enterprise business, or according to the second part of 13.11 article of the legislation, it's a similar article. And sometimes it's used to define the fine. There was an organization which had to pay 100 rubles, and this was the second violation. But in most cases, it's just 60,000 rubles. No fines. When there could be just a warning. A warning is a punishment, but you do not lose money. For some small and medium-sized enterprises, they can be warned, and sometimes a judge can decide that it was the first time the data was leaked and it was insignificant, maybe just a warning is enough. And there are rare cases where the case was dropped. In those two cases, where the organizations pushed for criminal case, and they say that it stopped. If you go to police, it works. And in two cases, Roskomnadzor was not able to prove the leak, and it also worked. So you either have to prove that there was no leak, which is quite complicated, or you have to start a criminal case and show that you actually suffered from the malicious activity of other users, and then the judge would agree that, yes, you probably shouldn't be punished. How does this end? There is a case which is not really transparent, but I think we should mention this. It's from Sirena Travel, an organization. In September, Muppets channel published information on this, and part of this database was published, and it's basically colossal. If it is true, just as hackers do, it's one of the biggest leaks in the recent years. Just a snippet of database was published with the screenshot. They had a case in November and they were issued a fine in December, probably 60,000 rubles too. It seems like it ended, but a few months later, FSB, Rosguardia come to the office, they arrest two top managers, and they start a criminal code, a criminal case, and they were not able to protect this information. So when we see this insensitive cases, it could be okay. But when we can see that it's a pretty sensitive case, then the fines could be higher and could be more problematic. This is all with the presentation, and I'm ready to answer your questions if there are any. I do have questions. Should you mask personal data when using for test environment or analytics, or you can just delete them to disallow leaks? I think we can take different perspectives on this issue, legal perspective, technical perspective. If we take a look at the current cases, usually it's open source data, basically, and based on this data you can do a lot. And if you consider only the organizational point of view, then yes, you can prove that you had data leaks, and if you can mask them somehow, this could be pretty well. How can you use procedural decisions to affect the decisions of your top management? Well, I think it's pretty easy. You can just demonstrate that there are more and more criminal cases, cases where other organizations had to pay fines. You also can demonstrate that there are more severe punishment and say, yes, currently it's 60,000 rubles, but it will be more severe next time when the new law passes. And you should just pay more attention. It's not just a risk where you have to pay 60,000, you have to pay more attention, and you have to protect this from leaks. I think this could be a reason for the top management to change their point of view. What can you say about the sanctions? Well, I think this is not enough, and when we are talking about the more severe sanctions, I think the organizations will be looking for ways to avoid this punishment. I think some kind of balance should be found. Organizations should treat it more seriously, but also it should not be fines in millions, even if they just leak hundreds of lines and hundreds of different data points. Obviously, the balance is required. Next question. How to react in the way when clients were notified that data were leaked? And we know that this happened in Yandex. Sometimes they notify their clients that data was leaked. But in most cases, this is not what happens. In most cases, they just decline this, deny and deny. My personal attitude, just as a citizen, I think it would be great if they would tell their users that data was leaked. Currently, it doesn't seem like it's important for them. From the business perspective, I think it's not the best solution, obviously. Next question. Were the incidents where hackers were punished if they published this information, that they stole this information or leaked this information? Well, there are cases if those hackers are in Russia, but many of them are not in Russia, and it's harder to legally punish them. A small fine for data leaks of millions of lines, but it's very different from the situation where there are potential reputational risks at hand. I think personal data operators could have more public, could be more public about data leaks. Currently, it's very not public. It's basically between you and the God and the Roskomnadzor. In terms of reputation risks, the organizations try to avoid this damage. If they would be legally bound to notify their clients, their customers, they probably would value and invest more in their protection just to avoid reputation risk. But currently the legislation is different, so I'm not sure if it change. What do you mean by queries, by lines? Well, what I mean basically is a line of information. These could be several lines on the same person. This is how we calculate this. And these are the questions. Thank you for your attention. And I hope that that's a very interesting topic for you and somebody might be interested in this. If I have to pick the best questions, I think all of them are good. I think I would choose the question, how do you use statistics from the court decisions? I think that's the better question. And we can actually motivate our top management and pay more attention.